Hello. Welcome to Wondermous. My name's Merikay Hunt, and I'm your host of a healthcare leadership podcast. And I just have to tell you, LinkedIn, if you're not on LinkedIn, you need to be on LinkedIn because it is such a blessing. And when Adrienne's profile popped up and I saw this background picture of her ballroom dancing, I said, I got to connect to her. So, welcome to our podcast, Adrienne Towsen. Adrienne, tell them a little bit about why you started ballroom dancing.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here and have this conversation. Yeah, ballroom dancing came into my life actually a little later than most people think. I was not a dancer as a kid. I played other sports. So I actually started ballroom dancing at age 46, which was
Wow.
8 years ago. Yeah. And by way of brief history, I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I'm a single mother. At that point in time, my two daughters were in high school. So certainly getting independent, having their own, social lives and doing things and not really needing their mom so much because my life really up until then was really dedicated to work and my kids. I didn't remarry or anything like that. So,
Sure.
so I was looking, I said, I'm going to need something to fill this void because, we were very close and, did some travel and this and that. And I thought they're going to be off to college soon. So let me see if I can figure something else out. We had actually been diehard fans of the show Dancing with the Stars.
Oh,
So
cool.
that was something that was part of the inspiration in that we just, me, my mother, my two daughters, we used to watch it religiously, still do. And it really kind of, I don't know, I just loved watching it. And I thought, wow, I'd really love to do it, and we went to some of their live performances and got like really into it. So there was a dance studio not far from my office, and one of my partners and his wife had gone for like social dancing lessons in the past. And long story short, I went for that. I said, you know what? I'm going to go and like just learn how to dance. I love watching it so much. I need something kind of for me to balance out my job once my kids are kind of more on their own.
Absolutely.
And it turned into this me living a dream I never knew I had because then I
Oh,
learned all about the pro-am competitions where students dance with their teachers, which is what I do now and what I've been doing for the past 8 years. And it's incredibly challenging. It's so much fun. And it became a passion pretty quickly. And I was not good, not a natural dancer at all. So it's been a journey. But it just really became like just such a great way to balance my life. And, it's such a different world from my day to day world.
absolutely.
But I devote a lot of time and energy to it. And it's been so rewarding. So,
Aw,
I highly, highly recommend it, even if it's not dancing. Like,
absolutely.
finding something that kind of balances you out is so key, I think, especially in medicine.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned a dream and a passion and I think that's one of the things that is so important so we can have that work life integration. And in fact, when I separated from my husband, I was pretty down and sad
Yeah.
about it. We've been together 20 years and
Wow.
one of my girlfriends who was a dentist who I'd known for several years, and in fact, she used to be my dad's hygienist. She had danced in Operation Smile. And so we were having lunch one day and I said, Sandy, I said, I think I might want to do that. And she goes, well, good, because I already gave him your name. So it was a great way to heal. And also to have something positive and purposeful to focus on. And, you've been through a healing journey, not just personally in relationships, but also from some of your leadership journey within the hospital that you worked in. So talk to us a little bit about your scope and your background professionally.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I've been in practice for 21 years. I, started my journey back in the day. Well, actually, still at this time, it's not a very popular specialty for women. Getting into it back when I started my residency in 1998. You know, I
Yes.
was the I was the first back in the '90s, I was the first woman in my program. I was luckily very well received in that program, though. There was still certainly some bias, and even today you find it, kind of against women in orthopedics, so it can be a little bit of an uphill battle. So I was the first and only woman in my residency. I was the first and only woman in my fellowship, and the first and only woman in my practice. So for a while, then later, as my practice like went through an evolution and expanded, There were a couple other women that were, part of like this bigger practice we became part of. But anyway, but it was, tough early road a little bit. I had both my children during residency, and then I was faced with my divorce right at the end of residency. So became a single mom when my kids were 1 and 3, and had a lot of help from my parents. We raised them together. We lived as a 3 generation household, but
Wow.
yeah, for 20 years actually.
My gosh, I
So,
got goosebumps when you
yeah.
said that. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
so I really couldn't have done it without them, so I will give my parents tons of thanks and praise at every
Oh,
opportunity I get, and my kids have such a nice relationship with their grandparents, still to this day, so it's
absolutely.
it's really, really, special. But professionally, I, became part of a practice. I had 2 jobs since residency. I initially started as a hospital-employed physician for 2 years at a little hospital that was very close to where we were living, and it was very convenient also because my kids were so young and just
Sure.
everything that was going on at that time. And then shortly after that, though, after the first 2 years, I was sort of recruited to join the group I joined, which I was with up until about 7 months ago. So I was there for 19 years.
Wow.
And once again, first woman, only woman for a long time. There was definitely some of that bias that was there, not with my partners, not with the group, but a little bit in the hospital, a little bit of just kind of making my way as like this new young woman who was going to come in and do some things differently also, that I had just come out of
Sure.
a sports medicine fellowship, and it was like the newer era of arthroscopic shoulder surgery back then. It was kind of a transition from, which is much of what I do, is kind of a transition from doing a lot of open procedures to arthroscopic, and just it was a transition zone, I kind of in that subspecialty. So there were some, hardcore, wonderful, but like old school, like ortho nurses and whatnot in the OR who were not too keen on me at first. And so kind of had to go through like winning people over a little bit, and not then being perceived as kind of quote unquote bitchy, if I can
A
say
little bit
that.
of a litmus test, like a 360.
Yeah. So, again, I was always just kind of very focused. And, at that point, I'm still also a mom with young kids. So I kind of wanted to get in, get the
Sure.
job done, and get out, kind of.
Right,
But,
right.
cared very much about what I was doing, cared very much about making good, lasting relationships. And I did. And so fast forward, I think I became, kind of like an anchor in my group in large ways, because all the guys I worked with were great, but there was kind of that little bit of that women's touch that could be helpful sometimes in certain,
Sure.
aspects of even just like employee morale and like other things in the office, or even in the hospital. But my practice was a private practice when I joined in 2006, and it was incredible. And then we evolved and we became part of a much bigger group, still a private practice, but joined like a big super group probably about 5 or 6 years after I was there. And then that evolved over time to a point where we did a private equity acquisition. And that
Mm.
occurred in 2022, or I should say, we were acquired by a private equity group. And it really changed things a lot, and like not in a good way. So I was a more senior partner at that time because I, was already been there since 2006. And it was really hard to watch what we had built, change drastically, much in the name of, profits over patients. That's that
Mhm.
kind of tagline. I hate it, but it's very true. And so then,
Well, let
as
me ask you a quick question,
yes, sure.
Adrian, because
Hmm.
this has happened to a lot of
Hmm.
groups across the United States.
Yes.
So initially, I think people want it to be a good thing.
Yeah. 100%. Hmm.
And I mean, I have a colleague in dentistry that this just happened to her too. So is it because they're telling you all a story and not
Hmm.
really being genuine with what the plans are? Just help me understand that.
Yeah, sure. So I think there's different reasons why people go the route of private equity. So sometimes, certainly it can be in the large hospital systems, and there's been a lot of that in the news over the past year or more, about hospital systems or hospitals individually failing and, going bankrupt and closing and all of that, which is just devastating to their communities most of the time, or if not all of the time. So there's that. And then there's the private practice sector as well. And so I think in some instances in private practice, it can be the smaller practices that are struggling a little bit with the obviously, all of the issues that we're dealing with decreasing reimbursements and, the insurance companies and all of the problems from an administrative standpoint and a financial standpoint that are really, causing a lot of private practices to struggle, unfortunately. And then the smaller you are, the harder it can be. Now, my group had evolved into, like I said, this big super group. So we were actually a group of like 75 docs or so at that point. So by no means small. Yet, I live in Westchester, Pennsylvania, which is not far from Philadelphia. So we're close to a big city. We're close to a lot of big academic institutions and healthcare systems that are like, getting out into the suburbs where we are more and more. So even though we had a sizable group, the thought was, and we were doing well, the thought was, we need to continue to grow in order to kind of maintain ourselves and also, kind of stay afloat and continue to do well, hopefully, and then even do better, into the future. And so that is most often like the reason behind even considering it. Okay. And then yes, for sure. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, they are business people and they have an agenda, which is really for their own personal gains. I would say, and I'm a little biased because our situation was not good, but I would say 100% of the time, it's probably not 100% of the time because you certainly do hear of occasional positive, deals and positive outcomes from this kind of, let's say, partnership or acquisition. However, the majority of the time, that's not the case, and I think there's way, way more examples of it not being the case, and it's 100% of a smoke and mirrors show. I mean, they will absolutely tell you what you wanna hear. They'll dangle some big dollar signs out in front of you and promise you the world. And then once they get their deal done, it's a very different story. So then starts with the cost cutting, then starts with the, huge management fees. Yes, you'll eventually get, to what we said, but right now we have to restructure things and we have to, cut the fat and like we have to get you guys more profitable and the doctors and all
Sure.
the other providers need to work harder and and all that time the profit is or any revenue is really being shifted dramatically toward the private equity company and we're just kind of scraping by and it's like wait, this is not what we signed up for. And even if people, whether they're the partners or shareholders in the original group did get a bit of a payout, people talk about this big check you get in the beginning. Sometimes it's really not so big. Deals can vary, but this is not life-changing money. This is not, "I'm gonna be set for retirement" money. It's not at all. Plus, I mean, they're buying or, acquiring something of value, so certainly the people who built it deserve something for it. But then that's not really what, plays out. So it became, in our situation, completely unsustainable for me. I was there for 3 years post the private equity acquisition, and
Right.
I couldn't do it anymore. I reached my breaking point emotionally, mentally, almost physically
So
with how much work we do in surgery, and financially, I was destroyed. Destroyed.
well, and what that really shares with my heart and it kinda made my heart sink when you shared that is the impact on your morale, right?
Mhm,
The impact on your work
mhm.
esteem.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter what position we have. I mean, we could be the janitor, and if we're still not being treated well, it from that whole perspective, and when you said too that it wasn't about the patient, it's about the profit, that can be detrimental because nobody wants to feel like they're in a factory. In fact, that's one of the reasons I left one of the first dentists that I ever worked for. Um, I felt like he was drilling for dollars. And I thought, you don't do 7 or 8 procedures on a patient at one sitting, and it made the patient ill. And I had only worked for my father, in the summers, and he was a periodontist, and I thought he would never do something like that. Anyway, I share that because, there prayerfully are good companies out there that are doing this, that have the morals, that have the values, that have the follow through. But you made a huge leap of faith, and good for you. So share with our audience what you're planning and what you're doing now.
Yes. Again, I had been in this group for a very long time and been so content, so happy. Like, honestly, I had the best partners, was 100% sure, up until this happened that,
Right.
I'd be there through my full career, retire from there at some point, whenever, but, loved my job and loved the people that I work with. Unfortunately, that wasn't enough. Once this had happened and it got to a point where I knew I just couldn't do it any longer and I wasn't the only one. There were actually So again, we were this super group, 75 plus docs. And then within my division of the group, though, there were 10 of us. And so we were actually one of the larger, small divisions within this big group. And we had a very special thing. We had 10, orthopedic surgeons that all got along, that were all like good docs and like, took great care of patients and prided ourselves on that because we were in this community. The practice had been in the community for probably 20 years before I even joined. So it had been like a staple in the community. And we were very well regarded and trusted. And so it was something that we worked hard on to build a reputation. So
Sure.
at the time that I worked hard to build my own personal reputation and was, very busy kind of in the prime of my career. I mean, I'd been with the group for 19 years. Uh, I'm 54 years old now. Like, you put a lot of effort in across that time to build trust and really get a community, to, want to come see you. And,
Right.
that was the
Exactly.
one of the go-to shoulder people, in my area. So when I decided to leave, I honestly really just said to myself, like, this is ridiculous. Like, even though I was at a point where, I'm still single, my kids are grown out of the house. They're both graduated from college now.
Right.
But I was going to work, whether it was surgery day or an office day at, 7 a.m. ish, working all day until 5, 6, whenever, depending, on the day. And then particularly on an office day, then coming home and working more to do charts and things that I couldn't do because despite the fact that we were, going through all of this, we were still trying our best to give our best care to the patients. And for me, the only way to do that was, I spent the time I had with these like regimented 10-minute appointment slots, just focused on the patient and didn't do any of my charting most days during the day. And then I'm looking at another like couple hours at home doing this. And even though again I was alone, I kept thinking like, what if my kids were still like I couldn't be doing this mom with kids at home, but I'm like I can't be doing this the way I am either because it's just
No,
it's
absolutely
like
not.
my whole life I'm miserable. I'm not being compensated well, and everything that was good about my job, the patients and the other people I was working with, again, it just wasn't enough. And I just, again, just kind of reached my breaking point. It was on a weekend that I was on call. I'd been at the hospital all day, like doing several
Oh,
hip fractures. And I came home and I said, that's it. Like, I can't, I just
when you
can't.
know, you know.
Mm. So that was in November of, or actually the end of October of last year, 2024, when it was kind of like that final light bulb moment. I mean, that had been
Sure.
brewing for months, but that
Sure.
was the time where I said, I just can't. So it was a Sunday night. I sat down, I wrote my resignation letter, and I sent it off Monday morning. And then I sort of took a sigh of relief and said, "Okay, like, you needed to do this, you did it." I had no plan. I wasn't, sure what I was gonna do next. I stayed for 6 more months, and so I didn't leave until May of this year, 2025. I still left without a definite plan because we have a non-compete and, there's that to factor in, and so I didn't wanna leave my community. That was the biggest thing. So I basically just said, "I'm gonna figure it out." So it's been an interesting, transition and an interesting journey since then. And I'm about 6 weeks away from opening my own clinic right here. Thanks. Right here in Westchester, where I live. But in order to do that, and where I've worked for the past 21 years. But in order to do that, I needed to sort of pivot a little bit. And so, I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I have absolutely loved doing that for all this time. But I am opening a clinic that's a little bit more of a wellness clinic, performance medicine type clinic, which is still aligning very well with what my purpose was in orthopedics because I was a sports medicine specialist. So the majority of my patient population was folks in their, let's say, 30s to even 70s beyond. I mean, a wide age range. And even I also certainly took care of like high school and college athletes, but a lot of people who were maybe just more than your weekend warrior, people that were, very interested
Sure.
in maintaining activity levels and, would have orthopedic injuries or overuse problems come in and their strongest desires, I got to get back to golf, I got to get back to pickleball, I got to get back to playing with my grandkids, like whatever it is, but an activity. And so my goal now with what I'm doing in the new clinic in order to stay in my community but not violate my non-compete is to offer different services and do things that can help people still more on the like proactive side, things with hormone optimization and other health and nutrition counseling and things like that, peptide use, all of the things that are, kind of again, maybe more preventive or just helping you to optimize your health so that maybe,
Absolutely.
you can avoid some of the overuse and some of the injuries. Certainly, you're never going to take that all away. And there is absolutely a need for orthopedic surgery. And it will always be my first love. But this is super exciting. And, it's me on my own doing
Yeah.
as the
So
partner.
what
Yeah.
came to my mind is, when's your non-compete over?
So our non-compete is technically 2 years,
Okay.
which is a long time because a
Sure.
lot of it, that's certainly a hot topic, and a lot of states have done away with them completely. Other states know. In Pennsylvania, where I live, in January of this year, no, not this year because it's 2026, January of last year, a year ago, they passed that you could not uphold a non-compete in healthcare for more than 1 year. However, that was for contracts that were signed, January of 2025 moving forward. So it's a little bit of a gray area as to whether or not, it would be easy or really able to uphold a 2-year non-compete at this point still, but that's what ours was. And ours was a very large geographic area because our practice was so big. We had so many practices that joined together that it really covered a very large area, such that, two other amazing surgeons who left from my division as well, one moved to a different state, and one is basically driving like an hour and a half to work every day now, to be in a different orthopedic practice, which, I had some non-negotiables when I left. Like I said, I'm, more senior gal. I'm like, there are things that I don't want to do. I don't want to move. I don't want to drive an hour and a half to
Absolutely.
work. I used to drive 40 minutes to work for a very long time. I didn't live as close to where, when we were living as a 3-generation household, I lived about 40 minutes away from where I worked.
Right.
And so now but I moved closer. So my parents and I did just separate a couple years ago. And I live like 10 minutes from where I used to work. And so
Nice.
I'm like, I just got close and I don't want to have to now drive an hour and a half away. So,
Well,
I
what
said
a
to myself, figure it out. And I did.
Absolutely. And what a blessing that, you've built your reputation and your roots in your community, and you wanna continue to give and serve. And I think it's phenomenal that you've delved into holistic
Yeah.
wellness,
Yeah.
and it's just gonna add more depth to what you offer your patients. And, we all know from an old sales perspective that, if people have a good experience, they're gonna tell people. And your reputation, your integrity, your work ethic, all of that is just going to continue to expand as you launch in 6 weeks. So I can't wait to see the announcement on LinkedIn about it.
It'll be there.
So
Yeah.
one of the things that I'd like you to share, a couple more things before we close, is what would you say to encourage someone who might be in a similar position to you? What would you like them to know, in their spirit or in their mind and their heart, to really give them the courage to make a change?
I say bet on yourself. I mean, some of it may sound a little bit cliche, and there's some kind of statements and things that you'll hear, from anybody who speaks motivationally or things that you read. But I will say that is the biggest thing. Is like, number one, if you're not happy, if something has changed around your situation that even was out of your control,
Sure.
it's not fair to yourself, to continue to like live in sort of a suboptimal way. There's other choices. I'd say there's probably, it's not going to be easy necessarily, but there's, almost always another choice. I would say the other thing is, don't listen to other people if they're trying to like sort of drag you down or kind of keep you stuck, if you will, or if they're telling you, like, "Well, what are you thinking? Like, you can't do this. Like, you're an orthopedic surgeon. Like, you've been practicing, for all this time. You're gonna just throw that away." I'm not throwing it away at all. I'm building on it, like kind of like you said. And instead, surround yourself with people who lift you up and surround yourself with people who are of your same mindset. For me,
Like,
yeah, I did, what I think is one of the best things I did was I started networking on LinkedIn. You mentioned LinkedIn in the beginning. It's how we met. It's how I've met so many incredible people over just the past like year and a half now. And
mhm.
without it, I would probably be, not as far along as I am. Not probably, definitely. I mean, a lot of
Sure.
where I am is in large part thanks to crazy support from people, some of whom I've never met in person yet. It's unbelievable. Many of whom I've had the most extraordinary time, over the past year, but even especially since leaving, where I've had the opportunity to be at some meetings. And it's like throw yourself out there, tell your
Absolutely.
story, network with people. You never know who you're going to meet. And I was so, again, like, sort of in my bubble. I mean, I have a lot of people I worked with because I'm at a hospital. I'm at two different surgery centers. I'm at my office. I have a big practice. So you have a lot of work friends and acquaintances and whatnot. So I felt very comfortable with, having plenty of people to interact with. But I have a whole new, network and group of people. I mean, easily 30 to like 50 people that I interact with on a regular basis now. Many of us, kind of in this group or network together, and it's been life changing in the best possible
Mhm.
way. And one of the people I give a shout out the most to is my incredible business coach who I met through LinkedIn. He lives in California. I just
Nice.
had the first chance to meet him in person in October because one of my daughters now lives in California too. And it was amazing. But he's been such a cheerleader, such a, he's an expert for me. That's the other thing is like, if you want to do something that you don't know how to do, find somebody who does. And,
Absolutely.
I mean, and then that's really the ticket, I think. And his help has been instrumental to me. I'm learning all kinds of new skills on like the business owner front that I would have had a very hard time navigating on my own. So, and then, just again, like I said, surround yourself with like minded people. It's not that
Mhm.
I don't still talk to former partners and have all of my friends here still, but again, I have this whole new amazing network of people that I just feel really, really privileged to have. So,
Absolutely. And we do become what we surround ourselves
yeah,
with. And
absolutely.
just this morning, I was talking to one of my clients and I said, "You remember when we talked about if it gives you peace, lean in.
Hmm.
It doesn't give you peace, lean
Hmm.
away."
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean we don't stretch our comfort zone, take risks, and try new things. But, that internal guidance, that internal gut feeling, it's usually speaking to us for a
Yeah.
reason. Well,
Yeah.
this has been a true pleasure. Thank you so much for
Oh,
joining
the
today.
pleasure's all mine. Mm,
So
thank
my name is Merikay Hunt, founder of Coach MK Companies. We are dedicated to help professionals go to the next level of performance. We wish you the best and remember to make every day count.